Back to Matthew Lloyd again. Matt, thanks again for all the Star Citizen help, and thanks for putting up with all the controller stuff a couple nights ago. We probably spent 2 hours watching my ship just go into roll state because the controllers and the drivers weren't matched up, but had a lot of fun doing that, and we'll be doing it again. And those of you who wrote earlier about Star Citizen, I'm going to get back to you tomorrow. I just had a big brainstorm about all this that I just went through. Would you like me to talk about it again? So Matt says, Bill, your excellent capitalism video, you talk about equality of opportunity as starting from the same line while running down a football field. How would you respond to progressives who don't accept the premise that we all start at the same line? Some of us start out with a big head start, and others start off with serious disadvantages. Sure, the law applies equally unless your name is Clinton, but how is that different from a sport where the rules apply to both teams equally, but one team starts the game with several points already on the board? That's a fair enough question. So let's just take it as an example. Let's take a person who's born to a lower income family, let's say, and let's talk about a guy who's born into a world where his parents are billionaire. First of all, if you're born into a world where your parents are a millionaire or billionaire, the chances of you becoming essentially worthless are high. They're not 100% by any means, but they're not good. In many, many cases, you find that the more advantages you start out with, the less running you do, and it's not hard to figure out why, you know. It is, when I say start at the same line, I'm talking about legal protection. See, this is the point. In order for this analogy to hold up, they're not saying that some people start ahead of others. I'm saying in a society ruled by law, everybody is starting from the same line. What the variation in people is that they're talking about, with some people being rich and some people being poor, it's not that they're starting ahead. It's that there's some people who are just faster runner than other people. They're just born faster. And if you were to take a look at distribution in this country and have a major problem with the one percenters in terms of height, you know, those 1% bastards, the 6, 7 above guys who are, you know, lording it all over the rest of us in this basketball game analogy. No one doubts that there's a virtually, well, in fact, a random distribution of height. Height is not, you can't be born into a family. You don't get to pick that. Those are the cards you're dealt. If you want to be a basketball player and you're 5'3" and you want to play in the NBA, your dreams are about to be shattered in the same way that your dreams would be shattered if you don't have good eyesight, you want to be a fighter pilot. Or if you want to be a jockey, let's say, and you're 6'3" and starving yourself, you get yourself down to 178 pounds. You're not going to be a professional jockey. My point is, however, you can ride a horse and you can race a horse and you can play league basketball with some very good players, and you can fly airplanes that sound a lot and feel a lot like fighter jets, but sometimes you just can't get there from here. So the business about them starting ahead or not ahead is not really accurate because we're talking about the rules of the game. Of course, some people run faster than others. Of course, a person who's born into a multi-million-dollar family has advantages that somebody who's not born into a family like that don't have. It's idiotic to say no, let alone naive. But the point I'm trying to make is this. You are not racing against other people, right? You're not racing against other people. Somebody else's speed, somebody else's time doesn't determine your time. In other words, if I can do that 100 yards in 11 and a half seconds, and somebody else does it in 9 seconds, that doesn't mean that I have to do it in longer time. I get to run as fast as I can run. And as long as no one is being held back, or boosted during the race, as long as nobody has legal advantages over other people, then I think the analogy is a really strong one. People being held back or people being starting on a line ahead of the goal line, in terms of the analogy for your progressive people, would be, well, a great example would be a lot of the situation, after the Civil War. Before the Civil War, the slaves were slaves, really weren't even in the economy. But after the Civil War and they got basic voting rights, there was an enormous societal, racial prejudice against them that were, in fact, shackles around their legs. It made life much, 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 much harder for them. Much, much harder, incomparably harder. Same for women. You know, I'm certainly old enough, just barely old enough to remember the idea that women, you know, they make excellent nurses and teachers and stuff, but CEOs or, you know, fighter pilots, please, you know, no. That's one of the changes that I had to make in my life, because it turns out they make superb everything. So prior to that kind of cultural revolution in the 70s, if you were a woman and you wanted to achieve these things, you were greatly disadvantaged. But you don't seem to be disadvantaged today. And as far as that goes, by the way, you might want to ask your progressive friends who say, you're saying that a rich white male has an advantage in this race, and that a poor black female has a disadvantage in the race. The rich white male starting from the 20, the poor black female is starting from the back of the end zone. And I would challenge you by saying, do you actually really think now that a white male has more opportunities than a black female does in this culture today? Do you really actually believe that? Do you think that if Harvard was looking for the final slot in its law school program and you had a black female and you had a white male with the same grades, are you actually telling me you think that the white male would have an advantage now? It's just a ridiculous thing to say. It's as ridiculous as saying he wouldn't have had an advantage 100 years ago. All of this stuff now is, all of the legal and societal pressures are now slanted not against minorities or the poor, they're slanted in their favor. And I want a world where I want a colorblind world. It's very simple, really, you know. This is just all I want. I want a world where none of this matters. I don't think they should ask your race on a census form. I don't think they should ask you anything on a census form other than how many people are in the house. We need to know how many people are there, because we have to determine congressional representation. But other than that, that's it. So I think all of these job applications, race on a job application, no. I don't think even, I was going to say I don't even think sex should be on a job application, but you probably get that from the name. In any event, that's pretty much it, Matt. It is an example of two things. One example is the racing the football field analogy. One of the things it's an example of is that life is not a zero-sum game. If somebody finishes faster than you, it does not slow down your time. Your time will be determined by how fast you can run, and that's it. So somebody coming in ahead of you doesn't mean they beat you to the peanuts, that, you know, there's only a bag for one guy. It doesn't work that way. So other people's speed does not affect you. But the much bigger point is, under socialism, if you want opportunity of result, then something does have to come in, because then it does matter whether somebody comes in faster than you or not, because the entire premise is that all of the times have to be divided equally. The entire premise is everybody's got to run the speed that they can all run at, which, as I say, is the speed of the slowest runner. It's not the average speed. Under socialism, if you want everybody to cross the line at the same time, it's not like you take the fastest speed and the slowest speed and have everybody run at that speed. You can't run faster than your fastest. And the entire race has to be slowed down to the speed of the worst runner on the field. And in order to slow down not just the fast runners, but in order to slow down everybody else, you have to shackle those people. You have to artificially slow them down. You have to get in their way and slow them down, load them up with weights. And that's why socialism is so morally evil. Forget the fact that it doesn't work. It's morally evil, because to produce equality of result means that you don't have the freedom to go. Everybody talks about income inequality and nobody talks about output inequality. If you are one of those people that believe in equality of result, then you're just going to have to answer me two questions. Number one, is it fair that a guy who basically is living in his parents' basement and then on government benefits being paid for by other people, is it fair for that guy who does nothing but play video games and watch porn, is it fair that that guy makes the same amount of money, has the same house, same car, same income as somebody exactly that same age who spent 15 years studying to be a brain surgeon and never had any real childhood or youth, childhood, never had what we would consider college, never went out drinking, study, study, study. You're telling me it's fair that these two people get paid the same amount? Do you really actually believe that? I find that horrendously morally repugnant and unjust. However, even if you run into somebody that vile who said, no, doesn't matter, everybody should get the same amount, then the second part of that question would be, okay, if you're basically going to run a society where you're going to have a gun to my head and tell me that if I work like an animal for 15 years, or if I just lie on the couch, I'm still going to get the same result, then how do you think that's going to affect the number of brain surgeons that we produce? Why would anybody become a brain surgeon? Why would anybody become an engineer? Why? Why would you do it? Why would people start businesses? What would be the point? Why would I be running this business, which is, I'm not trying to crucify myself, just in California, running any kind of business is very, very difficult. It's very, very, very difficult. They take all your money and they regulate the living daylights out of you. So why would I do it? If I can just hang out at home and play Star Citizen and get the same amount of money as I get here, why would I do it? Why would I want to make movies? Why would I, why? There's no reason for it. Parenthetically, Zuckerberg gave a commencement speech at Harvard not long ago. And he basically said, we should have a guaranteed minimum income. He said, we shouldn't have to worry in this day and age about worrying about paying our rent and paying our bills and our food. We should have a guaranteed minimum income. And then he went on to say in the same sentence, I think, he said, that way young people can spend their time learning how to code and find out their true potential. In other words, if we all paid for everybody's minimum income, then people would use that time to become computer programmers, which is what Mark Zuckerberg needs in his particular line of work, but they're not going to get to work if there aren't any electricians or if there aren't any welders or any of the rest of it. So the whole idea is kind of self-centered, but it's also ridiculous. If you pay people money, they're not going to sit around and become educated people. They're going to just goof off. And I don't need to prove this point. It's proved every day. Right now, virtually everybody in this country has a cell phone. The poorest people, most of them have mobile phones. And that means that you have access to the internet, which also means that you have access to all of the information available to the human race. And there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of online courses that you can take that are absolutely free. And if Zuckerberg's theory was right, then people who would get $50,000 a year to do nothing would spend that time, 8 hours a day, studying how to become all these other things that they can learn how to become for free. But it doesn't happen that way. It doesn't happen. People may actually feel like it's going to be, I got my $50,000, now I'm going to study how to be a welder, or those people don't need to be given $50,000. They already know how to work. I'm going to be a lawyer or something, so I'm going to take my $15,000 and I'm going to start to study law. Well, that sounds fine, and I'm sure for the first couple of weeks they're going to start studying law, but the next thing you know, it's going to be 8 o'clock at night, and their friends are going out, and they're not going to be studying law. They're going to be going out because there's no consequences for it. And after time, when it starts to get hard, because law is relatively hard, and so's engineering, and so's rocket science, and so's brain surgery, as it starts to get harder and harder, people will be less and less motivated to do it. Why should they? They're not going to make any bit of improvement in their life if they do it or don't do it. And then the next thing you know, the entire population is watching a WKRP in Cincinnati marathon, because that's human nature. That's how it works. You don't have to like it. But it's true, and that's why socialism is so immoral as well as ineffective. So much for that.